My 2-year-old asked, "What's the hardest thing about learning how to ride a bike?" I said, "The ground." All right, with the cheesy dad joke out of the way, thank you guys for joining us at the Loam Wolf. One of our favorite things to do here is do group tests, head-to-head reviews, and comparisons. Today we're gonna be doing one that's a little bit different. It's a 12-inch wheeled balance bike shootout. We've got 5 options behind me. We're gonna talk about each one of these bikes and give you some perspective from my 2-year-old daughter, as well as from a parent's perspective if you're looking to buy a balance bike for your new little rider. First wipeout out of the way.
Let's ride!
Taking a little deeper look at each of these bikes, we're gonna start out here with the Strider 12 Sport. This bike weighs in at 6.9 pounds. It is the most affordable at $139, and arguably Strider could be the Kleenex of balance bikes, right? These guys might have been the ones that started it all. I'm not a balance bike historian, but Strider is synonymous with balance bikes, and I think there's a good reason for that. They've got a saddle height of 11 to 19 inches. The top tube length, which is essentially the center of this steering axle, back here to the center of that seat tube, is gonna be 12.75 inches. The bar height is adjustable, as well as the seat height, which is a nice feature of the Strider, and it goes from 18 inches up to 22 inches. Strider claims that this bike will accommodate children from a 12-inch up to a 20-inch inseam. Next up is a bike that has probably gotten more use than any of the others, and we'll talk a little bit about that at the end in our ride impressions and final thoughts, but that is the Loam Wolf. This bike retails for $249. It has a saddle height of 10.4 up to 14.4 inches, so it's got the lowest starting saddle height. The top tube length is 11.5 inches, which is definitely on the shorter side, which also helped get my daughter on this bike soonest. The bar height sits at 18.7 inches, and the rider height is claimed between 31 to 40 inches in height. It retails for $249 and is the lightest of the shootout at 6.6 pounds. I think another reason that this bike was my daughter's favorite and the first one she was able to confidently ride on. In the berm. This was one of the first bikes that we actually got sent for the shootout, and sadly it didn't quite fit her for a while, but nevertheless it was one that got those juices flowing and got her really excited about getting on a bike, and that's the Bixby Tangerine. It retails for $269. It weighs in at 7.4 pounds. What's unique about this bike is that they offer something called a lowrider kit, and it's $25 per kit. They have one for the front and the rear. We have just the rear installed, and you can see it actually drops the axle about 1.5 inches. So it gets that bike a little bit lower for a little bit earlier of a start and allows you to raise it as they grow. The top tube length on this bike sits at 12.25 inches. Something to note, however, is that this bike has a 2.5-inch long stem, which is about 1 inch or more longer than all the other stems on the bike, and sort of contributed to this bike being really stretched out and long for my daughter. The bar height sits at 20 inches, which is pretty comparable to most of the other bikes out there in that 18.5 to 22-inch range. And Bixby says that an inseam length of 13.8 up to 18.9 inches should fit on this bike.
Please, it's not very scary.
It's not very scary. Next up is the Norco Runner. We have tested and reviewed a lot of Norco's higher end mountain and e-mountain bikes before and are big fans of their products. And I would say it's definitely noted that these guys are a more robust and well-rounded bicycle company. They are not just building Strider bikes or kids bikes, and I think a lot of that design element comes through in the geometry and the overall kind of feel and body posture on this bike. The Norco Runner retails for $299. It weighs in at 9.75 pounds, so it is the heaviest bike we have, but Norco is known for making burly, long-standing bikes, so This thing, if you've got a little shredder that wants to huck and drop and let this bike go, it'll last. The top tube length is 12.75 inches. The bar height is 21 inches, and Norco claims that the inseam height will be 13.4 up to 16.1 inches for your little shredder. And next up is the Pre-Velo Alpha Zero. This is probably the second most ridden bike by my daughter. She really liked this thing, and not just because it's pink. It retails for $239, weighs in at 7.4 pounds, has a saddle height of 11.4 up to 14.6 inches, a top tube length of 11.6, a bar height of 18.5, and a claimed inseam of 12.5 up to 16.5 inches. A couple quick bits about this bike were the ability to drop that seat pretty low at 11.4. It was on the lower side, not quite as low as the Woom, but definitely was able to get down there. Had a little bit of a shorter top tube length so she could feel nice and comfortable, not too stretched out. One thing that we didn't love about it was how this brake runs down here underneath. You'll know as kids are striding and walking with the bike, if their feet come in as they're pushing, it would sometimes catch and hit the brake or the chain stays, mostly the brake. And so that was a little bit of a bummer, but she kind of grew to work around that. And as her legs got longer and her stride changed a little bit, became less of an issue, but still something to note. So which are your favorite bikes that you like the most?
I like the orange one.
You do?
Yeah.
Which one is the one that you ride most of the time?
Purple.
Yeah, you like the purple one a lot?
And then
And what about the big blue, the Norco?
I don't do that one.
You want to do that one next? You like going mountain biking with the blue one, right? Because it's got the big tires.
Yeah.
You want to take that in the dirt and go down the wood ramp?
Don't not feel good.
No, ride the bike.
Oh, free ride.
Here we go! Definitely!
All right, folks, so thank you guys for sticking with us so far. Ultimately, I know that these things will get your kid down the road and learning the gist of balance, handling, and riding a bike. But since it is our job to be critical and test and review bikes, I find it hard not dissecting the little bits and parts about this bike that I think are standouts or holdbacks. So I'm going to share those with you guys. My daughter likes the purple bike the best. That's not a color thing. I believe that has to do with comfort. It was the first bike that she could get on and ride, so probably because of that time, she built more familiarity with it. I think a lot of that has to do with how low we were able to get that seat. I think being that it's the lightest bike allowed her to be able to move it, feel more comfortable with it. The narrow tires, while they could aid in some nimbleness and maneuverability on pavement in a paved track or something like that, when we get this bike into softer gravel, sand, cinder kind of paths or trails, the narrower tires cut in. They don't float or stay on top. So Daisy has had a couple of crashes because that bike is getting down in there and she's trying to turn it and that tire just sinks and cuts in. This is the only bike that has the Schwalbe G1 tires, and more importantly, the only bike that has tires with a reflective strip. The reflective bits on those tires add a little bit of peace of mind to the flashing, blinking lights that she's already got wearing, but I think that's an awesome little safety feature for sure. Another safety feature that's great is the rear brake. There's only 3 bikes that have rear brakes, and this one has the small hand reach brake lever, which some of the others do as well, but I think this is the closest, easiest for her to grab. She's 2.5 years old right now, and this is the only one that she can actually really pull with any sort of force to get those brakes to engage. Light, nimble, it handles well, it just works. I really like it. This little stop here is great to prevent it from spinning around and twisting the bars. Just a really good bike, and if you're not looking to go off-road in soft soil or dirt, this would probably be my recommendation. Moving on from there, I would say the Prevelo stands out to me a lot. It has a lot of the same things that I like so much about the Loam, but a little bit wider of a tire. It's a little bit heavier, and I don't love the wide chain stays, which is basically this tube that comes out. It was hitting my daughter's feet and ankles, and that brake being down there below was also an issue, kind of hitting her feet and ankles as she would step, and go back. But as she got a little older and taller, she learned to kind of work around that. The Norco is the next bike with a handbrake. And for me, I think handbrake bikes are going to take the cake, because as she goes faster, as she grows and gets more confident, there's only so many pairs of shoes that we want her to be burning through, and having a handbrake is nice. The Norco is the heaviest bike though. I also would say if your child or you have a tendency towards getting rowdy and going gnarly, you want that child to be jumping curbs, going off drops, riding it off-road, the Norco is going to probably be the best option for you there. It's got the highest volume, fattest tire, a little bit of knobs, that high handlebar position. Like, this is kind of the closest thing to a mini mountain bike out of the group, I would say. Moving into the Strider and the Bixby, my next they're both good bikes, but they're both different. The Strider is very adjustable. Seat height and bar height can go up and down. So and I think a 60-pound weight limit is the max on this bike. So the ability that you can raise the seat and the bar height as your child grows is nice. It's really simple. It's got, one-piece plastic wheels. There's no spokes. The tires I viewed as a negative, just because if you do want to ride on any sort of loose terrain, or if there's, little like gravel on top of the sidewalk, it's a hard foam, plasticky kind of a tire. The flip side to that is if you're not a bike riding family and you don't own a tire pump, you never have to fill it up. You don't have to go to a gas station or go to a bike shop. They'll never lose air. And with that combined with the height adjustability makes the Strider a pretty solid bike. And again, it's also the most affordable. So I can see why there's so many people that ride these bikes.
Same.
You're good.
Do you like that green one?
Here we go. Drop it in.
The Bixby is a cool bike. I think the long stem could be an issue, especially if you're trying to get a really small, younger kid on here early. The lowrider kit is nice, as it allows you to drop that bike down and get them on it a little quicker. There's nothing wrong with this bike. If it had a handbrake, it probably would have gotten a lot more use, to be honest. And if it had a shorter stem, or maybe a bar with a little bit of a sweep back or pull back that brought it a little closer, she also probably would have been spending more time on this bike. Now that she's gotten taller, she absolutely likes it. She rides it and has a good time. We're about ready to probably pull that lowrider kit out and get her up on it, and it'll continue to see some use in miles. But a solid bike, absolutely no complaints about it, beyond, I think, just getting that stem shorter would be a nice thing to get some of the kids on it a little bit earlier. So thank you guys very much for sticking around and watching. Hopefully you enjoyed. We had some fun chasing our daughter around the track here and testing these different bikes out. Thanks to Callie for sending us a sweet new helmet after a bit of a face plant we had about a month and a half ago. Getting this full face helmet has been a real confidence booster for sure, and hopefully we'll save those teeth until the tooth fairy comes to take them. Thank you guys very much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more mountain bike and e-bike content. Thanks to all the brands for sending these bikes for us to test out, and we hope to see you out on the trails.